Hello, I'm Paul Stoffels, Vice Chairman of the Executive Committee and Chief Scientific Officer at Johnson & Johnson. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Dr. Guislain Breaking the Chain of Stigma Awards. This is the 10-year anniversary of the award, which recognizes an individual, project or organization that has made an exceptional contribution to reducing the stigma associated with mental illness. The world has made significant progress over the past decade when it comes to mental health awareness and care. But despite the progress we have made, there's still a long way to go. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on mental health and illness around the world. Coping with the pandemic has caused widespread fear, anxiety and stress that many have struggled to handle. That is why it is more important than ever that we recognize and celebrate the trailblazing individuals and organizations around the world who are working to end stigma and give hope to those living with mental illness. At Johnson & Johnson, we are proud to be part of this critical conversation. Now, I would like to introduce the host for today's show, Mark Hennig. Mark is a mental health advocate who has dedicated his life to opening minds and creating change. Welcome, Mark. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Welcome to the 2021 Dr. Guislain Awards. I'm your host, Mark Hennig. This is the 10th anniversary of this award. So to include you in this special occasion, on today's broadcast, I'm going to be taking some questions and comments from the audience throughout the show. So throughout the show, make sure that you share your thoughts in your comment section wherever you're watching today. I'm going to come back a little bit later to those. Now, as I mentioned, for a decade, the Dr. Guislain Awards have been celebrating those who've been doing the work of change, of ending stigma, of saving lives. Now, I'm privileged to have been a mental health advocate myself for all of that time. And I clearly remember the not so distant past, the time before celebrity campaigns and national commissions, hashtags, and indeed awards for this sort of work. You see, when I was growing up in a small Canadian town on the rocky coast of the Atlantic Ocean, we didn't really talk about mental health. We certainly didn't discuss mental illness. Our service systems were scarce and elementary as a poor place of forgotten people. Even in a rich country like Canada with allegedly universal health care, systems, it turns out, are only as good as their deepest cracks. In most healthcare systems worldwide, mental health care in particular has historically been among the deepest cracks. Dr. Joseph Guislain, for whom the awards today are named, recognized this nearly 2 centuries ago. He was a frontrunner of modern psychiatry. Dr. Guislain was a progressive and award-winning physician, a researcher, and an early advocate for recovery. His pioneering work as the head of institutions for people with mental illnesses in Ghent, Belgium, led to a greater focus not only on evidence-based medicine, but also, and importantly, on social integration and on human rights. Dr. Guislain understood before many of his contemporaries that recovery is both art and science. The museum which continues his legacy, the Museum Dr. Guislain, seeks to prove that psychiatric disorders, they're not just purely medical in nature. The sociocultural and ideological structures behind them, these can dramatically change and determine even the attitudes that people have toward mental illness. It's those attitudes, in turn, which inform how fully the person with lived experience of a mental illness finds a place and meaning in society. It's how they become self-reliant and an integrated individual in that society. By breaking the chains of stigma and discrimination, we can not only broaden our view of those of us who happen to experience a mental illness, but also enrich and expand our view of the human condition more broadly. As a kid myself, struggling with my own ever-worsening mental health, I didn't have the benefit of this broader sense of the history of the recovery movement. All I knew in the isolation of my individual experience was that I was suffering. There was no theory, there were no grand ideas. There was only depression. When it comes to mental illnesses, and most states of illness and health, in fact, suffering is subjective. We can only truly know our own mind, after all, maybe, and in our own context, such as it is. So when I first found myself in that basement psychiatric ward for the very first time, at home in my little small town on the Atlantic Ocean, I had no idea if anyone could ever possibly know what that really felt like. How confused I was to be in a place of purported care that felt so cold. How scared I was not to understand my rights or my treatment. How alone I felt in isolation and restraint, but even worse in some ways in stigma and discrimination. It took me nearly 5 years of acute illness, robbing me of many of my formative years. There were many more hospitalizations, many more medications, and a long, winding road through recovery. But eventually, I did find a secure place inside myself where I could build my sense of peace. I'd go on to cultivate that inner peace over the years, to use my own story for good, and to grow as both an advocate and as a person. Recovery, you see, it turned out for me, came to mean a certain unfolding of a profound discovery inside me. Recovery meant discovering for myself that I'm not alone. Personally, the antidote to the oppression of my depression was connection. Now, this looks differently for everybody, of course, but I built my personal recovery concurrent with my advocacy. My story, through my advocacy, acquired a purpose, and I got to decide what that purpose was. To show others the light that had broken my darkness. At first, only flickering, hardly noticeable, but then over time, it grew into this passionate fire inside me. Life on the other side of my worst moments hasn't always been perfect. But perfection isn't the goal when survival is the imperative. And stories are how we survive. We're part of one another's story. So here's what I've learned over the last 10 years, and indeed longer in my mental health recovery. When you feel lost, you are not alone. And people simply saying so and sharing stats, that's not enough to convince you, is it? Science is necessary, but not sufficient for insight, for change. Statistics aren't going to solve stigma. Leaflets won't alleviate our loneliness. Only human connection can do that. And connection is an art. Connection is when you reach out, when you reach into somebody else's darkness as well as their light, when you see the world from somebody else's perspective and maybe even lend them some of your own perspective just for a little while. Connection is when you choose to see another person, to hear another, not to turn away from either their joy or their suffering. Science is necessary. It's also necessarily detached. Connection is equally necessary. It's profoundly personal, inherently intimate, and deeply disarming. It's only when we lay down our arms, lower our defenses, show our humanity, that we can access the humanity of others. From a scientific perspective, suffering might be subjective. But so are you. You're a subject, not an object. You're an active agent, not a passive recipient. You are not a number. You're human. This is your condition. You can change, and you can be change. This is all of our story. For 10 years, the Dr. Guislain Award has been celebrating those who are change. The world of 2021 is so different in many ways than only 2011, both in terms of progress and the challenges yet to be conquered. Everyone watching and listening today will certainly recognize that there remains much work to do. We've not eradicated the social and cultural stigmas that surround mental health. We continue to face significant gaps in both scientific understanding and technological solutions to the barriers faced by the millions who live with mental illnesses. Yet, while remaining vigilant and prepared for the journey ahead, it's important too, I think, that we recognize and we validate the progress that's been made. We've come so far, my friends. Millennials and younger are more likely than any older generation not only to recognize, to acknowledge that they might be struggling with a mental illness, but they're also more likely to actively seek help. Together, we've raised awareness, we've raised funds and knowledge and acceptance of mental health and mental illness worldwide. In only a decade, we've taken steps toward becoming better ancestors, toward building the stigma-free world that we want for our children and our grandchildren. This is a generational change. And this would not have been possible without the tireless work of the humanitarian heroes that you're going to meet today. One recent such hero that I'd like to remind you of was last year's winner of the Dr. Guislain Award. For more than 30 years, Grégoire Angbanon has devoted himself to demystifying mental illness and organizing contemporary psychiatric services for people in need across West Africa. After battling and recovering from depression himself, he was inspired to help others, just like me. Applying many of the same humane principles that Dr. Joseph Guislain sought to integrate in Belgium nearly 2 centuries ago, Grégoire created the St. Camille Association to offer individuals in West Africa basic and psychiatric care. The association operates nearly 50 inpatient psychiatric centers, rehabilitation centers, and outpatient clinics, and it's estimated that around 100,000 people have benefited from their services, and they've been able to return to their families, to their communities, which is where recovery happens. After receiving the Dr. Guislain Award last year, the grant allowed the association to strengthen its capacities in their various centers. This ultimately allowed them to strengthen the rights of patients. The St. Camille Association now holds conferences where they aim to make society understand that these patients are just like anybody else with any other illness. In the same spirit of social support and human rights in which Grégoire has been changing lives, let's look at how the museum Dr. Guislain has been advancing his legacy and expanding the conversation about mental health and mental illness.
Inside the Museum Dr. Guislain, a collection of art and artifacts tells the complex history of mental health, innovation, and progress. As important as the collections within the museum are the walls that house them. In 1857, the Dr. Guislain Psychiatric Center opened its doors. The origins of the center and its novel approach to mental health care are closely tied to Joseph Guislain's own personal upbringing and philosophy. Born into a family of architects, Guislain believed that the architecture of a building was its own form of therapy. With this philosophy in mind, every detail from the courtyards to the intricate wrought iron windows served both a decorative and a functional purpose. The harmonious blending of art and science worked together to aid in the treatment of patients. As the first asylum in Belgium, the Dr. Guislain Psychiatric Center served as a model for other institutions around the world. In 1986, the Museum Dr. Guislain opened its doors to the public to provide greater access to knowledge and information on mental illness, and to celebrate those working to find new approaches to mental health care. The exhibits within the museum explore culture, art, and science, and celebrate the artists, in addition to the researchers and psychiatrists who have contributed to our understanding of the mind. Headlines, a work by Belgian artist Denmark, is a visual abstraction consisting of 365 prints of the artist's forehead. It aims to highlight the artist's different mental activities, from fearing and understanding to deciding and desiring. It sits alongside an exhibit examining technological advances in the scientific mapping of the brain that took place early in the 20th century. The work by Professor André de Wolf paved the way for further advancements in brain scans and imaging. Together, the museum's setting, exhibits, and archives provide an opportunity to explore and learn while ensuring the past helps inform the future. It is this combination of history, innovation, and art that helps the Guislain legacy to live on. There is still much work to be done, but the Museum Dr. Guislain and its stories of the past serve as an inspiration for tomorrow's greatest technological advancements.
Thank you so much to the Museum Dr. Guislain for the work that you do. This year, to more fully reflect the art and science of recovery as originally advanced by Dr. Joseph Guislain, we're excited to have added a new award category to the Dr. Guislain Award. In addition to an award for path-breaking work in the arts, society, and culture, A second award will now also recognize significant contributions in science and technology. In the mental health space, as I've personally experienced, scientific research necessarily intersects with the artistic and cultural world to provide the best care for people in context. We are our brain, but our brain also exists in a world filled with beauty and complexity, pathos and wonder. The intersection between science and art is where global mental health issues filter through the unique lens of the individual to create something beautiful and profound. Our two awards today perfectly reflect this harmony of art and science in recovery. To tell you more, I'm honored to ask Bill Martin to introduce the winners of the 2021 Dr. Guislain Awards.
Thank you, Mark. Mental health is a topic that deserves more conversation. According to the World Health Organization, there has been a 13% rise in mental health conditions in the last decade. Despite progress in some countries, people with mental health conditions often experience severe human rights violations, discrimination, and stigma. That is why I'm honored to announce the winners of this year's Guislan Awards, who continue to break down the stigma associated with mental disorders. 2021 was a record-setting year for Guislan submissions. We received 85 submissions from 27 countries, from health clinics, scientists, and not-for-profit organizations, to art galleries, journalists, and other groups working to have an impact on mental health. I would like to extend a sincere thanks to everyone who submitted. Your work to advance mental health care and fight stigma so often associated with these biologically driven disorders is what this award is all about. We have repeatedly seen how art can provide therapeutic relief and a positive impact on mental health. Organizations from around the world have used creative output to help raise awareness of mental health and the stigmas that surround it. And that is where we find our first of this year's Guislan Award recipients. The Green String Network is a not-for-profit organization based in Nairobi, Kenya. Mental health services in under-resourced, violent communities in East Africa lack funding and generally have an extremely limited infrastructure. Support is limited, quality psychotherapeutic solutions are scarce and too expensive for most of the population. And there continues to be a significant amount of misunderstanding about mental health there. Dr. Angi YoderMaina launched the Green String Network, utilizing artistic mediums such as local folktales, forum theater, watercolor illustration, and other creative endeavors to decrease stigma and start healthy conversations about mental health. We proudly recognize their work in presenting Dr. YoderMaina and the Green String Network with the 2021 Guislan Award in the Art, Society, and Culture category. This year, we added a Science and Technologies category to the awards. Science and technology have inspired profound breakthroughs in virtually all aspects of our society. The application of science or technology can help to improve mental health care quality and access, or further public understanding of the biological basis of mental health diseases and disorders. Because of this, we are happy to recognize advancements in science and technology in its own separate category this year. 3 decades ago, the Banyan was launched in Chennai, India, by a team of medical professionals and community organizers who are particularly sensitive to the issue of helping mental illness among the homeless. Mental health challenges hit housing insecure individuals particularly hard. The Banyan has connected over 1,700 homeless individuals with their families and helped countless more by providing an array of long-term living solutions. The organization has addressed mental health concerns of socially disadvantaged individuals, servicing over 1 million low-income households with their person-centric approach and an ethos of social justice, equity, and participation. What's more, the Banyan's methods on rehabilitating these individuals have been published in several scientific papers. We are proud to recognize the hard work of the Banyan and what they've done over the years by awarding them with the 2021 Guislan Award in Science and Technology category. Congratulations to both organizations. And now, back to Mark Hennick.
Thanks so much, Bill. Joining me now to discuss their award-winning work Angi YoderMaina from the Green String Network in Nairobi, Kenya, as well as Mrinalini Ravi from the Banyan in Chennai, India. Mrinalini, I'd like to start with you and have a little bit of a conversation here. You know, I've long been interested in the moment of change, the aha moment, or that initial spark of a movement. And I understand for you, it started with a young woman. You know, I think it's easy to get swept away in these big ideas and big organizations, but I'm wondering if you could tell me about that humble story of your beginning. What was that spark of a movement for the Banyan?
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And thank you to the entire team of the Guislan Awards to, recognize the work of this incredible organization of which I'm proud to be a part. Well, yes, you said it right. Most times we just think that everything starts with like a big idea and we have this storyline and our life sort of paved ahead of us. It never happens. So the Banyan story becomes all the more beautiful because it's an accident that led to such a beautiful moment. Well, our co-founders Vandana and Vaishnavi were walking out of college onto a busy road in Chennai, India, and Chennai is a large metropolis, and the college road, as they call it, has people coming and going, but there was this woman sitting there. She was alone and barely clothed, and she'd clearly been raped because you could see the scars in her body, and frightened. And what I think ran through, if I could speak on behalf of the founders, was that what if that was me? There was really nobody, looking at her. And what if that was me? And that was a terrifying thought, but it was also inspiring because it gave them a spark that I think they'd always been looking for. And it said, okay, you know what? I need to do something about this. And it started as a step to take this woman to a care facility that would help her out. And she left in 10 days. So it didn't have a great ending in that sense. She left because that place was not suited to her needs. So that sort of beat them over the head even more, that it's not just tokenism, it's not just going and admitting someone and forgetting about them. It's a whole lifetime of work, and at least they thought it was going to be a year or 2 years, and it just ended up being what it was.
Yeah. So then they ended up, of course, building the system that was needed, right? Building out the Banyan to provide for that need that they saw firsthand.
Absolutely. So it was going step by step. But what I would say is that they never stopped thinking about the woman, and they still don't, because the idea was that I need to respond to this person's needs. And initially, I thought it was taking her to a facility. Then it became maybe starting a facility. Then it became maybe starting a bigger facility. And then it was maybe a different kind of facility, then bringing in more stakeholders, then maybe researching about the facility. But it was always that one woman, or it is always that now it has become one person or that one child, right? So we never lose sight of that, which is what has sort of kept us going all these years and will keep us going for the next how many ever years or centuries.
Yeah, keeping the person at the center of the story. Angi, I'd like to go to you here too, and you and I have talked as well about the power of storytelling, and as mental health in particular, as peace building, inner peace building. World peace in many ways starts as that individual peace within the people participating. So, based on your many years of experience, working in this space, working with individual people, individual stories, how did that spark start for you? How have you seen this unfold in the real world?
I think I always go back to the story of Ahmed Famau. He's a young man from Lamu in the coastal part of Kenya. And he looked very much like somebody who might be somebody from Al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization from Somalia and on our coastal Kenya. And he was profiled and arrested and tortured very many times by the Kenyan police. And when we first started to work with him, I told him, one day, Famau, maybe you'll be able to work with the police. And he looked at me really clearly and he's like, I will never, never. And in fact, I learned later, by that time, he was already starting in his mind to develop the ways to start to, join Al-Shabaab, to think about where he could go to engage with violence. And as he started to go through our encounter, when he started to put his story together, when he told his story, when others told him their story, he started to see himself in them. And real healing and transformation started to happen. And 3 years later, we asked him, would you be willing to facilitate this kind of work with Kenyan police officers? And at first he's like, let me get back to you. And he called later and he said, I want to do it, but if I have to, pull me out. And he did it. He did it in 5 days. He's now done it all over the country. He's changed who he is in his own mind and heart because of the healing process that he went into, but he's brought healing to so many other people. And his story shows that individuals can make transformation, particularly with that connection that you spoke about as you started this afternoon.
Now, he worked, of course, on changing himself as well, but it sounds like he's doing significant work himself to change the world, to be the change. So what kind of impact do you think that he had on the police officers and others that he's been speaking to?
He's had tremendous impact. He's had the impact of real transformation and change. He's sat down and he's talked with officers about their own pain. And I think that this is the type of healing that police officers in Kenya, but probably police officers across the world actually require today in today's world.
Yeah, I am struck by the heroism, not only that your organizations facilitate and make possible, but by the heroism of the individual people who participate in these programs. We always see the annual reports and the top line messages, but we so rarely see the individuals who partake in your two incredible programs. Now, finally, to each of you, I'm interested in a bit more about that one action or habit that our viewers can take away today. They might not be speaking with police or, building treatment centers in India, although maybe they are, hopefully they are. So what is something simple that you think our viewers can do today to change the world just a little bit for people living with a mental illness? Marie-Nélanie, I'm going to start with you. What's something you think that people can take away today?
Well, the best thing I think one can take away when you talk about mental illness is to ask yourself uncomfortable questions about your own mental health and to see what, would have helped you or who would have helped you. And then to just go to the person who you see closest who may have a mental health issue. All of us, 1 in 4 of us has a mental health problem. So it's just a question of going seeing what is in your heart that you've pushed it away for a while, and then it makes sense to you that you're pushing other people away with similar issues. So I think confronting certain uncomfortable truths regarding our own mental health is the first step in reaching out to other people.
Yeah, if you want to see others clearly, start by cleaning your own glasses. Angi, what's the one takeaway or action or habit that you'd like people to take away from our conversation today?
Pick up the phone, talk to someone, just connect. Say, hey, how are you? What's up? These are the small things. We're living particularly still in the global south, very still much isolated, not being able to connect. Use the technology that exists, check on people, and really make people feel like you want to know how things are going for them.
Yeah, reach out, build that connection, reach into their story. I love that. Angi YoderMaina, Marie-Nélanie Ravi, congratulations for your very well-deserved honors. And thank you so much for speaking with us and spending some time with us today as well.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And congratulations to you.
And to you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Now, throughout the show, we've been gathering the comments and questions from the audience. So thank you for sharing those, for having an open conversation. We know that it's dialogue that makes a difference when we share our stories, when we hear other people's stories, as we've just heard our incredible award winners speak of. One theme that I've noticed as I've been glancing down through some of the comments that you've been making is that we've made great progress, but of course, there's still so much further to go. So Victoria from LinkedIn Live asked, what can I do to be an advocate? I I think about this all the time. What can I do to be an advocate? And I really liked Maria Nalini's comment to take care of yourself. That so often we reach out to others and as a way, I think, of escaping ourselves. But if you want to do the work in the world, that work starts, I think, within yourself, building that peace within yourself to be the change that you want to see in the world. Courtney from YouTube has a question about stigma as well. Do you think stigma will ever be gone? You know, stigma is a fascinating topic to me because we know that you can change attitudes without necessarily changing behaviors. Education is great. Awareness is great. We need those types of steps to raise awareness of mental health. But until we actually change the structural barriers that are impacting people, that's the discrimination piece. That's stigma in action, is discrimination. Until we actually tackle discrimination, we'll never fully defeat stigma. And that means changing behaviors in real, meaningful, policy-oriented ways. It's not enough to learn, as important as that is. We need to make changes, and changes are uncomfortable. So we need to, I think, start with our schools, with our workplaces, and make it much more difficult for people to stigmatize and discriminate against other people, to make the risks of that or to make the rewards, rather, of overcoming stigma outweigh the risks. So thank you so much for being a part of those questions and comments. I'm mindful here. I want to keep us on time to be respectful for your time, but keep making those comments on there. I'm going to pop on after we wrap up our show today, and I'm going to try to answer a few more as well. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Hussaini Manji to share some closing thoughts with you. Hussaini, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Well, with that, the 2021 Dr. Guislain Awards are in the books. Thank you for joining today for this celebration of the truly extraordinary people who put in the tireless work to improve the human condition. Since the Dr. Guislain Award launched 10 years ago, we have come so far as a society in raising awareness around mental health disorders, removing prevalent stigmas, and providing resources and support to those who need them. But as we all know, we have so much more to do. As we endure a global health crisis, the time is now to confront the difficult issues around mental health. With education, innovative thinking, and greater compassion, there's no limit to what we can achieve together. Thank you to all our guests today, and most sincere congratulations again to our award winners, Dr. Angi YoderMaina and the Green String Network and the Banyan Organization. We look forward to seeing more new ideas and impactful work being done by individuals and organizations around the world. And some of these may even win the award next year. For more information on how you can nominate next year's Guislain Award recipients, please visit the Dr. Guislain Award website. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and be well.
Hussaini, thanks so much. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation that we've had today, and we're inspired by the incredible work happening to overcome the stigma of mental illness and to promote mental health around the world. That's unfortunately all the time we have for today, but until next time, I'm Mark Hennick. Take care of yourself and each other.